designated per conference and selection of the seating process of the 13-member committee. So again, not saying all those things can change, but at least for the buys, it does seem like for next year, because again, there's only a 2-year trial period, that is something that could potentially change for 2025.
I'm down with it. Like, again, I think it is the right move. I mean, the last thing you want is look at how the system works to begin with. I think they also need to reseed once they get into the next round and stuff, because you're having one side of the bracket where things are really easy, and then you have the other side of the bracket where things are extremely tough. So I think you just need to balance and figure a way.
One thing that also really stuck out to me a little bit later on in this article, because let's go back to this past weekend, right? Yeah, you had Arizona State and Iowa State in a de facto play-in game. You obviously had the Mountain West Championship with Boise and UNLV that was a play-in game. But like the Big Ten Championship and the SEC Championship game, the two biggest championship games in all of college football, lacked that certain feel because we knew both teams were going to be in the playoff regardless. Yes, they were playing for a first-round bye, but didn't quite have the same juice that it's had in years past where you knew the loser was going to lose any shot of playing for a national championship. So it begged the question of, okay, what does that mean for conference championships going forward? Because it seems like they are devalued a bit in this new era.
They definitely are. And again, it's only 1 year, but like, and you could get a year where maybe it's, you know, both teams, whoever loses is essentially out. It could be kind of like the Clemson, the group of 5 situation. It could be like that. I think this was just a year where both teams were really good, and you know, they only had one, like Texas only had one loss, and Georgia had 2, so they were pretty much both in.
So
it's not gonna be like that every year.
In this Dellinger article, he pointed out something that I think is very interesting in terms of the future. Now we know that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to push for more automatic qualifiers per conference, essentially saying, hey, you know, the Big Ten's going to be guaranteed 4 spots. The SEC is going to be guaranteed 4 spots. We'll give, you know, the Big 12 and the ACC a spot or 2 and go from there in a likely expanded format. What they propose, though, for conference championship weekend does pique my interest, though. That instead of a traditional conference championship game, because assuming if you have those automatic buys, automatic qualifiers, which I'm not in favor of, but let's just play with it here, they would go off conference standings. So instead of having a championship game between 1 and 2, what if you played a play-in game between the last 2 spots? So let's say the SEC is guaranteed 3 spots. Instead of just saying, okay, we'll take 1 through 3, 3 and 4 have a play-in game, where you're essentially expanding the college football playoff even further to individual conferences that we're having to play your way in instead of crowning a champion that doesn't mean as much as it has in years past.
I kind of like that. I do kind of like that, but I think that adds more stakes to everything. It kind of reminds me a little bit of when the 4-team playoff first began, and TCU and Baylor weren't getting in because the Big 12 didn't have a conference championship game or whatever. But it's kind of like a little bit of both here. So I think that's a really good idea, and it creates more stakes. The thing is, though, the SEC would have to make sure they get 3 guaranteed spots. And I think there should be allotted spots for each conference. Like, I think the Big Ten, SEC, they should probably get, 3 each probably?
See, I don't sign off on any AQs. I just want them to go 1 through 12.
You just want them to go, okay.
Or if we go to 16, 1 through 16, I want it to be as close to the best 16 as possible if that's the number we end up with. And I think when you get into multiple AQs, that just kind of skews that a lot.
So what do we do with them with the conference championship situation? Well, I think you just play the game then at that point.
That's the dilemma, because if you are just going 1 through 16, winning your conference championship at that point would put you in a good position to host a first-round game. But especially if there's no buys, and I don't know what natural purpose it serves, obviously. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you go with automatic qualifiers, you put more value on that extra game, which again would kind of do with if they restructured the first round buys, where now instead of, you know, an AQ conference champion get it, now it's subjective based on the committee ranking, and saying, okay, well, we think you're the 4th best team, you get a bye. We think you're the 5th best team, you have to play first round games. So I think getting to 16 eventually alleviates a lot of that. And again, now we're expanding it out to 3 and 4 loss teams probably, but I think that it seems like that's where we're headed.
Yeah. Hey, South Carolina can get in much easier.
South Carolina would be in with 16-team playoffs,
Yeah.
so there's that.
Although I'm sure there's going to be a way to leave them out somehow. So the criteria, we'll figure that out. We need to know what that is too.
Yeah, we'll certainly have to see, but it does seem like change is coming sooner rather than later based on how this year's college football playoff poll did end up shaking out. Speaking of the playoffs, yesterday Bill Connolly of ESPN Plus put out his list of the best and worst college football playoff teams of all time now that we've been doing this for over a decade. We're going to examine this list a little bit, see what's right and see what's wrong. That's coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyrod and Jack Veltri on your Wednesday on the Game. Tyrod once again for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Tell you about it all the time, but I'll remind you once again, if you notice weird things going on around your home, you need to get those things taken care of. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be sticking, uneven and bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these problems with your home, then you could have serious foundation issues. That's where our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate what's going on with your foundation and get it fixed right so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. Laying the Wood segment brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. It was announced yesterday, right at about 24 hours ago, Dylan Stewart returning for another year at South Carolina, which there was no, doubt that he wasn't going to return, but they got his deal together with the Garnet Trust, and he is confirmed to be back for 2025. Obviously, he's been laying the wood a lot this season on defense, still has the opportunity technically to set the freshman sack record in the Citrus Bowl coming up here in a couple weeks to cap off what's been an incredible first year here at South Carolina.
You definitely needed to make sure he was going to be back next year, and I know there was that report that came out a few weeks ago that the discussions had begun and it would be a 7-figure deal and all that. And look, he's going to get paid a lot, and that's what he deserves. And moving forward, he is the building block of your defense. He's the cornerstone. You just got to figure out, okay, who are the pieces going to be around this guy? You have a lot of returnees.
Yep.
You're losing a lot too, though, and you have to replace those guys.
Yeah, and again, we'll see what Carolina does in the transfer portal here over these next couple weeks in terms of building its defense, but obviously getting Dylan Stewart back, a huge, huge deal, and that was done yesterday and announced by the Garnet Trust. Yesterday on ESPN+, Bill Connolly put out his list of ranking every single college football playoff team that's ever made the field as we now get set to enter the 11th year of doing this. We've had now 52 total teams, counting this year's teams in there, and it's interesting to kind of lay these teams out from best to worst because obviously there's been plenty of great teams, ones that have won the national championship, but there's also been plenty of teams that you kind of look at and say, I don't know if they deserve to be here or not. His pick for the greatest team of the college ball playoff era wouldn't have been mine, but he went with the 2020 Alabama team.
That was a really good team. You have to think about it this way. Everything was just clicking that year. That was the first year without Tua, so they had Mac Jones as the starter. I mean, they had NFL talent everywhere. I think it was Devontae Smith won the Heisman.
Yep.
Pretty sure John Mechie might have been on that team. I can't remember.
Henry Ruggs. Judy?
I
think Judy was on that team.
Yeah, it was either that or 19. It was his last year. But, I mean, look, man, that receiving core was stacked. And that was just, I mean, that was a great team. Even though it was the COVID year, they were beating everyone.
They were. And again, I don't remember any of their games getting canceled that year. COVID was such
I don't think
weird season. They played all the games they were supposed to, won the SEC over Florida, obviously won the national championship and, beat Notre Dame in the semifinal of, and in that year's semifinal game pretty easily there. I still would have put 2019 LSU at number one personally.
I would too. I was a little surprised to see it. That I honestly, man, in my time of watching college football, I know it hasn't been that long, but I have never seen a greater college football team than LSU. That LSU team was insanely good, and there's a reason why they went undefeated, 15-0.
That team, for one, was just a lot of fun to watch. You didn't have to be an LSU fan to make those games appointment television because they just dominated everyone. Defense was really good, and obviously what they were able to do on offense, putting up ungodly numbers with Joe Burrow en route to his Heisman Trophy season. And I think the fact that it was such a one and done type of thing. Because here's the thing, look, Alabama has consistently been in the playoffs over the course of the past decade, obviously won multiple national championships. But LSU, I think we all kind of watched that team knowing, hey, this is kind of a last dance kind of thing. After this year, you lose pretty much everybody. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all those guys. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, was gone after that year as well. And it's going to revert back to being, just a good...
that come to mind, like Cincinnati, Notre Dame during the few years where they got beat by Clemson pretty bad, and then they got beat by Alabama pretty bad. I mean, who comes to mind for you as a team that is on this list that, you really don't remember, but then it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot they somehow got in.
So let me see here. He's got him ranked at 42. That 2021 Cincinnati team, and look, I'm not downplaying the accomplishments of what they did running through the AAC, winning the conference championship and all that kind of stuff. They, by the way it's written at that point in time, deserved to be in, but they were no match for anybody they would have faced off of in that playoff. Alabama, Georgia or Michigan. And they only got beat by Alabama by 21 points, 27-6. If Alabama really wanted to, they could have throttled them for about 40 or 50 points, but they kept it light. Obviously they had another game to focus on after that, but that Cincinnati team did not belong on the same field, it seemed like, with Alabama.
No, definitely not. You remember the first year of the playoff, and we had this whole debate. It was kind of like last year, I guess, with Florida State. That 2014 Florida State team, the one led by Jameis Winston, coming off the national title, they're undefeated. They get into the playoff when they had a lot of close wins, and then they get smacked by 39 points, I think, by Oregon in the Rose Bowl, and Jameis Winston cocking his arm back, and the ball goes loose, and it's this whole meme for a little bit. I mean, that's one of the teams that's like, how did they get beat so badly?
Yeah, again, they had, I think it was 7 one-score games that year. You knew they were going to trip up at some point, and it took until the Rose Bowl for that to end up happening. I'm trying to think, where does he have those guys?
45.
45, yeah,
which is fair. And then I think another team that honestly, man, rehashing the past, 2014 Ohio State. That might be, I think that's probably the most underrated team. I don't know, because of the situation.
Yeah, I think the fact that you got down to your third-string quarterback and never skipped a beat is maybe the most impressive thing we've seen in the college football playoff. Because again, it was Braxton Miller. He got hurt. JT Barrett got hurt in the Michigan game, and then it's like, oh crap, Cardell Jones is going to have to start the Big Ten championship game, which they throttled Wisconsin 59-0. They beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl and then won the national championship pretty handily over Oregon. For just the circumstances they had to deal with, that should probably place them, I'd say, higher on this list.
Because they're only at 9, I think.
Because they're at 9 behind, a couple of Alabama teams, both of Georgia's national championship teams, Clemson's, last national championship team. I think what they overcame, and there's a lot of talent on that roster as well, maybe deserves to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's most deserving because, again, they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and I think that was a 1 or 2 score game. And then in the national championship out in Dallas, they throttled Oregon, and that was a good Oregon team with the Heisman Trophy winner at the time. So, look, the things they overcame that year, to go out there and not skip a beat, like you said, with Cardell Jones, that's insane.
And I don't know if we're going to see that feat replicate again. Georgia's in a position with Gunnar Stockton right now. It seems like he's going to be the guy to ride through the college football playoff. But for the most part, when your starter goes down, that's kind of it. And it almost seemed like, in a way, they got even better, even with Cardell Jones playing.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. That 59-0 game, you cannot forget that. That catapulted them in because, remember, pretty sure they were behind TCU and Baylor that year in the playoff picture, and they leapfrogged both teams.
Yeah, because the Big 12 couldn't decide on a champion that year.
Yeah, because they didn't have a conference title game back then. Of course, they changed that the next year. But
yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to look back on it, and of course, his back half of this list now is comprised of teams that are in this year's playoff field.
I don't like how he included that because it's like we can't judge. We can judge them based off the regular season, but the playoff hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't, and rightfully so. These teams are a lot more flawed than any other playoff teams they've ever had because we've expanded the thing out. But I'm intrigued to see, between Arizona State, who's dead last here, Clemson, who's, third from last, SMU, who's 47 out of the 50 on this list, which of those teams might actually be able to go on a run is going to be interesting to me.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think it's kind of crazy how Arizona State's the last team on here, but hey, I think one of these teams that we don't talk about enough, like Clemson, Arizona State, one of these lower seeds, Boise, I think one of them will go on a big run here.
We'll see. Obviously, their work cut out for them with the exception of Arizona State having to go on the road and play in a first round game. But it is a different set of criteria that we judge these teams on now. The fact that we expanded the playoff field out and probably will change again whenever this format changes, I guess.
Yeah. It's we'll see what happens, but it was a very interesting article, and shout out Bill Connolly for doing that because it was a good story.
We'll take a look at the all SEC teams, see which Gamecocks made the cut for 2024. Up next, it is the Extra Point Towerhead and Jack Feltry on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is The Extra Point. Tyrant and Jack Belcher along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Yesterday, we got our announcements of the All-SEC team for 2024, and there are a couple of Gamecocks on this list, to no surprise. On first team, no first-team offensive players, which that not surprising because most of South Carolina's offensive production was in the back half of the season. But Kyle Kennard at defensive line, and then Nicky Minwari at DB, both made first-team defense.
Makes sense. I think both those guys are definitely deserving. I would have maybe added another guy or two. Maybe, where is D-Knight, man?
That's what I was going to get to as far as like overall omissions from this list. He was one of the highest solo tacklers in the entire conference.
Yeah.
Which, again, that's just one metric, but something that, especially as we saw in the back half of the season, played like his hair was on fire. I think he had a huge impact on the success of South Carolina's defense, just kind of anchoring the middle of that line with his skills and obviously his experience. But no, he does not appear on first, second, or third team on defense.
Snub. But yeah, I think overall, though, the list in general, it feels about right. First team with offense, you got Jackson Dart, Dylan Sampson. Like, that's all fine, but, like, I don't know. I mean, I thought maybe like a Rocket or Sellers, but it's tough.
So Rocket comes in second team, all SEC at the running back spot. And, I'm good with that. I mean, Dylan Sampson and Jarquez Hunter had phenomenal years at Tennessee
really
and Auburn, respectively. And, if Rocket isn't banged up for the early part of the season, who knows how much better his numbers could be. I think second team is probably about fair there. And, good to see him get recognized. And somebody did pose the question earlier. I believe he does actually technically have an extra year of eligibility. I don't think he's going to stick around. I think he goes ahead and goes to the league.
But here's the thing, man. And, I mean, what is he going to be, a day? Would he be like, 7 rounds of the draft? So what would he be, like a 5th, 6th round pick? Like, and again, running backs are so disposable in the NFL to where he could come in and be an impact guy. Or he could come back next year. I know his injury history isn't great. Come back, make some NIL money, probably as much as he would make at the NFL, and then go from there.
I lean towards it. We don't know anything. We're just kind of speculating here. But given his injury history, especially considering the fact that he got dinged up again this year, I think the play to me is to go ahead and go to the league because you have the opportunity to sustain being in the league as opposed to come to college where, especially if you get hurt in your last year, then that's it for you. Yep. And yes, you could theoretically make more money or some kind of comparable money here at Carolina, as a premier running back compared to what you might make in the league for league minimum or whatever. I just feel like he's probably going to go. Yeah. That's my gut feeling.
I'd lean towards it. I'd probably say like a 70% chance, but that's just my ballpark in my head. But third team though, they got a few guys on there.
Yeah, so third team just on offense got Lenore Sellers and then Torricelli Simpkins the third. Again, Sellers, has put up in the last 6 games some of the best numbers in the entire conference. If he replicates those numbers, through the entire season next year, he's got a very good shot at being at the Heisman Trophy ceremony in New York next December if he continues to play that well. Then Torricelli Simpkins on the offensive line. What we've lauded as the best offensive lineman this team's had this entire year, and rightfully so. Yeah, the last couple games of the season, or particularly against Clemson, didn't go exactly the way you wanted it to, but from a full season standpoint, you're consistently best offensive lineman.
Exactly. I totally agree. And also, how could we forget Kai Kroger, first team All-SEC. Shout out to him because, I think he got snubbed from the Ray Guy Award and whatnot, but it's good to see he's getting the respect in the SEC. Another guy I just thought about now that was left off this list notably, and again, maybe there are some pretty good tight ends in the SEC. Josh Simon, not on this list. I get it. Eli Stowers, first team, totally understandable. Gunnar Helm from Texas, okay, cool. And who's the last guy here? Mason Taylor from LSU, is that right? Yeah. How is Josh Simon not on this list?
I think the injuries may have had something to do with it for less data points. There's that word again.
The dreaded word.
Because I'm looking here to see.
I mean, he had a great year. I mean, he eclipsed all his numbers from last season, I'm pretty positive here. I mean, he had a great year.
Let's see. Where does he stack up in the SEC in terms of pass yards?
And again, these guys might be a little better than him. I know Stowers and guys like that are really solid.
So he's the fourth tight end in terms of receiving yards,
which I guess
so
is
far this year with 450. And again, he was the main cog in this passing game for much of the season. I do think the injuries at the end of the year and just not playing as much do ding him a little bit in that regard. But at least maybe like a third team would have made sense, but they decided not to.
I'm surprised Trey Harris is only a third team guy on here. I thought he had a really good year. I know he dealt with some injuries, but
yeah, and again, the injuries can kind of
that kind of messes things up a little bit. Hey, no Juice Wells on this list. That's
no Juice Wells. You know,
the grass isn't always greener.
The retrospective on the Juice Wells transfer is interesting because his fear, I guess, was that Sellers wasn't going to be good enough to help him reach his full potential.
Oh.
He goes and plays for Jackson Dart, who is a good quarterback, still didn't help him reach his full potential. And
it's more like he didn't help him. About pro day and all that. And we'll see if he plays in the bowl game. I think he needs to.
Yeah, we'll see.
But we'll see. So
that'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up in hour number 2, dive into what's going on with the University of North Carolina and Bill Belichick. We'll check in with our resident of the Tar Heel State in Dimitri Venos coming up next. It is the Extra Points Hour Head along with you and Jack Beltry on your Wednesday here on the game. It's our Ed once again here to tell you about our friends over at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. I tell you about them all the time, but I'll remind you once again, there is truly no better place to hang out, especially with all the great sports going on with our friends over at Twin Peaks. Do you consider yourself a bourbon connoisseur? At Twin Peaks, they are proud to offer an exclusive and extensive collection of some incredibly rare bourbons, whiskeys, and tequilas. Plus, you can check out their barrel selects that are handpicked by their team and bottled just for you. No one does happy hour quite like Twin Peaks either. Whatever your preference, they have everything from tequila cocktails and that extensive bourbon category to top shelf spirits and cocktails served over ice balls. Local craft beers, handcrafted whiskey cocktails round out an adventurous drink menu that is truly second to none. And don't forget about those 29-degree man-size draft beers. All this with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista.